So I'm going to show you how I do Intarsia. It's actually really easy. This square in the center of the blue is considered the Intarsia block. And to do this, I'm going to knit across these stitches with this ball of yarn, and these stitches with this ball of yarn, and these stitches with this ball of yarn. So before I started, I wound off some yarn from the original ball so that I would have a smaller ball to use for this section. You cannot use this ball over here. So you can't knit these and then carry this behind and then knit those. It's not stranded knitting, it's Intarsia. So another way to do this would be if you had wound this on a ball winder and you would have a center pull and an outside pull. You can use the center pull for this square over here, and you could use the outside pull for this. And it gets a little tangled, but it's really not that much that you're doing, so it's pretty easy to straighten out. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to knit across. Okay, so really this is the only technique, the only tricky spot for Intarsia. If I were to knit across this, these stitches with this yarn and then just pick this up and knit across here and then do the same over here, I'm gonna get 3 separate blocks and they're not gonna be joined. And in this particular case, I would like them to be joined. And so all I have to do is when I'm switching colors, so I just knit that last stitch of the blue. And now what I need to do is take the old yarn, lay it across the new yarn, pick up the new yarn, and knit across. And what that does, if you can see this, it hooks the old yarn in the new yarn, and you just get these caught together, and it gives you a beautiful connection seam right there. So then you knit across with this last stitch. Now I'm ready to join them again, this time to the smaller ball for this little square. So I'm going to take the old yarn, lay it on top of the new yarn, and pick up my new yarn. If for some reason you forget, I have been known to forget to join the two. When you're weaving in your tails on the back, you can always use that tail to just close up the gap if you've forgotten a stitch. You'll see a little hole and instead of a join here, and then you'll know, oh, I just need to close that up. So you can see mine's caught and it worked just fine. Okay, so now I'm on the wrong side of the piece. And we want all our joins to be on the wrong side. So I have just finished knitting across this row, and I'm going to start with this new yarn, the new twist. And so to join those together, I'm going to take my old yarn and move it to the front and kind of lay it right over that new section. Then I'm going to take the new yarn and I'm going to lift it up and put it between the 2 needles. And you'll see then that it's caught, my old yarn is caught in there. Just the way we want it to close up that gap. And now I'm going to knit across this way. So now I've come to the last stitch, and I want to catch the two yarns together here before I start on the blue. So I'm going to take the old yarn and move it to the front, and then I'm going to take and make sure it's over the blue yarn. I'm going to take the blue yarn and I'm going to move it to the back. So you can kind of see that this old yarn is caught in there. And now I'm going to knit across. And there, you can see there's a little gap, and you just tighten it up as you go. I'll show you the front. And that's really all there is to Intarsia. I'm going to show you how to weave in ends on this Intarsia piece. And because it's a cowl, and this is obviously the right side and this is the wrong side, but on a cowl or a scarf, you don't want the ends really to show on the wrong side. Often when I'm weaving in ends, I'll leave a long tail and all of that. And this, I'm gonna not do that. I want this to be as invisible as I can make it. So the way that I weave in ends is I follow yarn that is already in the piece with my tail. So I take my tail and I thread it onto my tapestry needle. I like the bent tips because it just makes it easier for me to get into the places I need to get in. So now I'm going to look and I'm going to see, okay, there's already this color yarn going here, and then it goes down and up through here. So I'm going to follow this line with my yarn. So I'm going to go under here and under this one. And I'm not going to pull too tight because I really want it to be invisible. I just want this yarn to lay on top of the other. So I'm going to go under here and under there. And then I'm going to keep going under. And you can see I'm just following up here. This is kind of like duplicate stitching, but from the back side. And one thing that I learned from making a sweater and then wearing it a couple times and ripping the entire thing out so I could knit it again is that weaving in ends, you think it's not going to hold, but I can tell you from trying to undo all those ends that I had woven in on that sweater, I did not need to be as meticulous as I was. So it was very hard to undo. So you can see, or maybe you can't see, that I have woven this about an inch, just covering the yarn that was already there. It's a little thicker than the rest is, or the rest of that row, but otherwise not so visible. And then I'm going to take scissors and I'm going to snip this very close so that even if it does pop through, the chances of it getting that far. Also the advantage of working with this yarn, this is Plied North Avenue, is that it's kind of sticky. And so it's not slippery. It's not going to slide through by accident. And you can see some of the ends that I wove in here. I just cut them about this much. And then you can fray the ends a little bit if you want to, or just kind of work them in. And soon with wear, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that at all. So that's how I do it. So the final step of this cowl is going to be, before the blocking, is going to be to join the two ends. So this is the cast on edge, and I did a provisional cast on, so this is going to come out in just a minute. And then I'm going to join this end that I have just finished of this rectangle to the cast on edge, and that is going to make for a cowl. You can also do a 3-needle bind off if you'd rather do that. If you did that, I would do like some contrasting color and make it a design feature. And I think that would be really cool. But what I'm going to show you now is how to graft in Garter. We often do Kitchener stitch or grafting in stockinette, and but because this whole piece is in Garter, I'm going to show you how to do it in Garter. And it's actually easier to do it that way. So the first thing that we need to do is take out the provisional cast on and put it on a needle. I always choose a smaller needle because it's easier to get through the stitches. It doesn't matter what size it is because you're not knitting with it. You're not going to determine any stitch size based on it. When I do a provisional cast on, I always do a couple extra little chain stitches on one end so I know which end comes out. And so I can tell because I've got a little more here, and on this edge there's nothing. So this is the side that you can just pull open. And as I pull a stitch open, I'm going to stick it on my holding needle. Whenever you're putting live stitches back on a needle, you want to put the right leg forward. So if this is the right leg and that's the left leg of a stitch, the right leg goes on the front or right leg forward. And you just go through, and you can either scoop it up and then pull, or in this case you can pull and scoop it up. This is not slippery yarn, so it's not going to fall out. The way that I have this positioned is that on the back is the needle that I put through the provisional cast on. So this is my cast on edge, and I have the wrong side facing me. So for this, we're going to do wrong sides together. And so on the front needle, I have the right side facing me, and I have the working yarn attached. And I've cut a tail that's about a yard long. I don't think I'm going to need all that, but better safe than sorry. So I'm going to, since my yarn is attached to the needle on the front, I'm going to start on the back, and I'm going to go through the back stitch as if to knit and pull this through, and then pull that off, and then through the next stitch as if to purl and leave that one on. And if you stick your finger in between these two, we'll get away from that in a second, in between the two needles, it helps to tension, to keep a correct tension, because really that's the trick. And you want to go under. You don't want to go over the needle. You want to keep it under. So I'm going to go in as if to knit and off. And the second one is if to purl and leave that on. And then on the back, you're going to go in as if to knit and off, in as if to purl, and leave that on. On the front needle, in as if to knit, off, in as if to purl, and on. And make sure that this doesn't get caught up on top. Make sure it goes in the bottom. And in as if to knit, off, in as if to purl, on. And you can see that it's slowly coming together. The first stitch is a little loose, so I'm going to look at it periodically and just pull these stitches. So that you still want, if you're looking at a regular stitch, you're going to see there's a valley in between the ridges, and you want to make sure that you maintain that on the top as well. So in as if to knit, off, and as if to purl, on. You're doing the exact same thing on both needles, which is what makes this easier than if you were to do it in stockinette. In a zip to knit, off, in a zip to purl, on, in a zip to knit, off, in a zip to purl, on. And I can tell where I need to go if I stop in the middle because my working yarn is coming off of the back needle, so that I know I need to go into the front needle. In a zip to knit, off, and purl, in a zip to knit, off, and purl. Wants to get caught up on those. As I get closer to the end, I always want to count my stitches and make sure that I have the right amount. So 2, 4, 6, 7 on the back and 2, 4, 6, 7 on the front. It works out perfectly. It usually does in a case like this where you're just knitting a rectangle, but sometimes when I'm grafting the close of a thumb or the close of a mitten or a sock, sometimes I get off. And so, you know, probably started with the wrong number of stitches. So I just want to make sure if you do end up having the different number of stitches, you can just go through 2 stitches instead of 1 and make up for it at the very end. So don't worry too much about that. Okay, so they work. I'm checking back. I like my tension. This stitch seems a little big, so I'm gonna tug on that a little bit and even this out. Okay, and then we'll just finish this